perspective as well. So James, always good having you here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start here because this was a crime that was caught on camera, and it was really it was brazen. It was right outside the hotel. It was right on the sidewalk, and seeing the video of what looked like someone just stepping out and in cold blood just shooting this CEO as he walked out of the hotel. I remember it had a number of people saying this seemed like a professional. Now it turns out that it's not the case, and they didn't take too long for him to be tracked down. And just let me get your kind of initial thoughts on how this all has kind of come to an end here.
You know, first of all, Garrett, if you watch that that scene where the shots were fired, where he fatally shot this CEO, I mean, it was almost like you're watching a movie, right? It's something we watch on TV or a blockbuster. It captivated everyone's attention, and that was the most shocking part. And you know, keep in mind, we're the age of technology, so there are video cameras everywhere. We all have one in our hand, so you know the chances of committing a crime and getting caught on tape are very good today. So that's the first thing I want to point out, because digressing into the case, once that event happened, the shooting occurred, you know, the guy literally rode off on an e-bike. You can't make this stuff up. So it looked very planned, very methodical. Although I will point out, at the time of the shot being fired, the first one, it appeared that his gun had a malfunction, and now we since learned that it was a 3D printed gun, so that could have explained that malfunction. If you recall the video, he's clearing the slide and clearing that jam. So, you know, probably a technical issue on the printing part of that gun.
And I do want to get into the gun a little bit here in a little bit, but just let's talk about the manhunt, because it seemed like every day we were learning a little bit more. We were kind of seeing some new photos that were released and that kind of thing. Just kind of walk me through what that process would have been like for the investigators really trying to close those walls in on this suspect.
Yeah, I mean, the NYPD is amazing in terms of their intelligence unit and also the cops, you know, on the beat, the street cops. And in this case, this is a good example of 101 good police work. As soon as that shooting occurred, they cordoned off the area, and literally, Garrett, they started going door to door, knocking on doors and businesses, looking for additional witnesses. And you know, thank goodness that we had a camera outside of this location where the shooting occurred, because that was a huge part of this case. They had at least some idea of what this shooter looked like. And then as it progressed, you know, we eventually seen the image that you just showed on the screen of him in a taxi cab. And, you know, although he had a face covering on, you definitely could see those eyes. And those eyes were, you know, the eyes were, they stood out to you, right? They were like these perfect looking eyes staring into that camera. So that was a huge part of solving this case as we progress forward. But the manhunt was huge. I mean, they were covering Central Park. You know, they located a couple of items in Central Park, basically going out and grid searching that park. So, you know, it was all hands on deck. We hear so much negative coming out of the police communities, but I've got to tell you, in this case, our cops did a fantastic job starting the investigation, going door to door, canvassing the neighborhood, and actually locating items that later were connected to the shooter.
And this is obviously something that was premeditated, that was planned out, but at the same time, this suspect made some mistakes along the way that really kind of ended up with him now being behind bars and charged with murder. What were some of his errors?
You know, my friends in the law enforcement community, we've been debating this case for a couple of days, and I had actually one of the guys that I trained early on in our career. He was like, oh my gosh, it was so neat, and the guy was methodical, and it was so well planned out. And you know, I disagreed with that. And in retrospect, looking at how this individual was apprehended and his movements after the shooting, it was very sloppy. And you know, just given the fact of the malfunction of the gun, that's not something a pro would have a problem with, because you're going to go out and you're going to test run that gun to make sure it operates perfectly, so you're not to have a malfunction. So that was the first error, I think, and that was a telltale sign to the gun community, because they're like, okay, something's not right with this weapon, which we later found out it was a 3D printed weapon. But you know, he just left so many clues. The hostel that he stayed in, he literally used an ID at that hostel. And that was later connected to him when he was apprehended in the McDonald's. So of course you have identification, you have DNA that he left all over the city, the hostel, Starbucks. They actually recovered a coffee cup that was later connected to the shooter via DNA. So that's going to be a big hit in court as that proceeds. But being sloppy, it's just amazing how this guy was apprehended in a McDonald's with his photo plastered globally. This wasn't just the US, they had it in France. A lot of countries photographed or had this video going of the bad guy. But to be so sloppy to sit down and try to hide in plain sight, very, very, very sloppy job on his behalf, which shows he wasn't a pro.
We saw, most of the time it seemed like he was trying to keep his face covered in some ways, but in a number of those photos that we did see, the one from the hostel where his mask was down, and I thought it was interesting that the McDonald's employee who ended up calling police said they recognized him from those photos and from the eyes and from seeing that. So just talk about the importance of those photos getting out and being spread everywhere and being able to track this guy down.
Yeah, I mean, social media, there's a lot of negative on social media, but my goodness, in this case, that his photo was plastered on every platform available, and people were on the lookout. I mean, this was a shocking crime, number one. Number two, it was on video, so it was captured on video, him literally shooting this man to death. So, it captivated and caught the attention of almost everyone in America. And, had they not had that video, and had it not been plastered on every network and social media, this guy probably would not have been apprehended so quickly. So, heads up to the McDonald's guy. I hope he gets the $50,000 reward because it's well earned. But here's something else too. The officer that actually responded to that McDonald's on that sighting, he's been a police officer for less than 1 year. And, I heard his interview with the mayor out of New York, and it was just amazing to hear this young police officer being able to take one of these, the most worst guy on the case, right? I mean, he cold-blooded murdered this guy on video and was able to apprehend him. So kudos to that officer. But I think as a combination, we have to give our citizens a lot of credit in the communities for getting engaged. We always hear if you see something, if you see something, say something, right? So in this case, someone saw something and actually took action, calling that police department saying, hey, we think this may be your shooter.
I want to talk more about the gun that we've heard, referred to as a ghost gun. It is believed to be 3D printed. Just talk about how that is becoming something that we're hearing about more, and is that concerning that these are weapons that in many cases you don't have to buy and go through the normal processes and really can just kind of be printed out of thin air just about.
I'm going to get some flack from my Second Amendment friends on this, but absolutely, there is no way possible that you should have the software, number one, or the schematics to print out these ghost guns. I'm an avid Second Amendment guy, but I'm calling for more legislation, more penalties on ghost guns. In this case, luckily for law enforcement, this guy was stupid enough to have the gun on his person when he was apprehended, right? So what would have happened if he would have ditched, and he's had plenty of times to ditch this ghost gun. If he would have done that, there's not a serial number attached to this weapon. No one purchased it because there's no records. And I really and truly think this ghost gun is a problem. I hope the incoming administration at the White House sees that and does more to prevent these programs being readily available for people to just go print 3D guns. It's something we need to crank down, and we need to have some serious prison time on those that get caught with ghost guns.
We've also heard that that the suspect has some sort of manifesto, some writings that I'm sure we will learn more about in the coming days. After seeing and learning about this and the messages on the shell casings, does that surprise you to hear that